Welcome to another SNA Speakeasy. Today we are having our first speakeasy with the island nation of Mauritius, and our guest is named Vikash Tatayah. And why don't you explain a little bit about who you are and how it is that you come to the position that you're in today?
Well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I am Vikash Tatayah. I'm the Conservation Director of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, which is the strongest NGO on Mauritius. And we work in biodiversity conservation for animals and plants that are terrestrial, so on land. And we work on the mainland of Mauritius, on islets, and we also work on a territory of Mauritius called Rodrigues. And how did I come to be where I am? Well, after university, I applied to a job and I managed to get a job in the organization, and that was 23 years ago, and here I am. But my involvement with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation goes back to 25 years, so a quarter of a century already.
Okay, well, a quarter of a century. That sounds pretty good. All right, well, with that perspective, let's start with that point, quarter of a century. In that quarter century that you've been working with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, how does this incident with the MV Wakashio rank among that? Is this the worst environmental disaster you've seen, or have there been others of comparable size in the past?
Um, I think this is the worst disaster that I've seen. Of course, you see the ongoing degradation of habitats on Mauritius, and there are attempts to try to restore these habitats. You see, for example, now and again, you get a rat that comes to an island, and one of those was a rat getting to Flat Island, shrews getting to Flat Island, and that was in 2010, and that caused quite a lot of destruction. So that for me was the biggest disaster that I've seen in my career at the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation. But the current one is the far more extensive damage that you would have seen, and it's different, very different in the sense that we have cases of invasive alien plants or animals getting to islands or getting into habitats on the mainland, but we've never had an oil spill. We've had a number of shipwrecks. And in fact, over the past 10 years, from my count, we have at least 5 or 6 shipwrecks. But we've never had any oil spill of a big magnitude. We did have one 4 years ago from a ship called MV Benita, which was in the same region as where the Wakashu ran aground. There was a oil spill which was just contained in the small bay of a place called I forgot the name of the place, La Cambuse, but that was cleaned up. It didn't go much beyond that small beach. But the difference with the Wakashu is that, first of all, it's far more consequent in terms of the amount of oil that is spilled out. We are talking here of nearly 1,000 tons of oil, and had the measures not been successful, we were talking of 4,000 tons of oil. And the extent that it covered also, it's now the areas affected is basically almost a quarter of Mauritius. It's the southeast region of Mauritius. So it's very large, and it's a major oil spill, but it's also quite large in terms of the area that is covered.
Okay, well, explain to us, for those who don't know that area, what kind of landscape and seascape is being affected by this oil spill, and in what way is this oil spill a threat to it?
Okay, so the area where the ship ran aground is Point Destiny, which is in the southeast of Mauritius. Mauritius, for those of you who've had a chance to visit Mauritius, is a beautiful island, and it's got fringing coral reefs almost all around the island. This is what creates those beautiful lagoons that makes the postcard pictures that everybody sees around the world, and makes Mauritius one of the most sought after tourist destinations. Now, the area where it ran aground is, just to put it in a bit of perspective, is only about 2 kilometers, 1.5 kilometers from the Blue Bay Marine Park, which is a Ramsar site of international importance. It's around 2-ish kilometers from the Point Destiny Ramsar site, which is another Ramsar site. We have 3 Ramsar sites in Mauritius, 3 declared Ramsar sites of international importance, and 2 of them have been affected or are in the region of the wreck. There are a number of islands that are also affected. Now, when the ship ran aground and there were plumes of sand that was being sand and silt being churned into the ocean went milky. From this beautiful turquoise, green, and blue, it turned milky, and that was of the grounding of the ship just grinding into the reefs. And the Îles et Grecques Nature Reserve, which is a nature reserve that we've been looking after for the past 36 years, is 2 kilometers in the direction of the currents and the winds, and was the first site that was affected. So Îles et Grecques has got critically endangered birds that we've reintroduced on the island: the pink pigeon, the Mauritius fody, the olive white-eye, which is critically endangered. The others are endangered. And we also have critically endangered skinks and geckos. We have lots of rare plants for which the world population of these endemic plants, which are unique to Mauritius, are found on this small island. And this island is 26 hectares. It's very important because it's the last remnant of coastal dry forest left in Mauritius, of a unique forest type, composed, for example, prominently of ebonies, a rare species of ebony. There are a number of other islands which are further to the north of Îles et Grecques and north of the ship, just again within a few kilometers, that has got rare reptiles unique to Mauritius. And those islands have also been touched by the oil spill. And these islands are called Îlot Vaqua and Îlot Phare. Phare means lighthouse because the island has got a lighthouse on it. And of course the area where the Wakasho ground, of course it was on the reef, but inside the reef, this is a fisheries reserve. This is a designated fish reserve where a lot of people from the Maibo village, which is a large coastal village, people obtain their livelihood from agriculture, but they also obtain their livelihood prominently from fishing and also from ecotourism and tourism. So, in fact, we are talking of the effects on the sea because the 1,000 tons literally flooded the bay in the southeast of Mauritius, what we call the Mayberg Bay, covering practically all of it. And of course, the oil also reached the shorelines. So the beaches on the shorelines in the southeast, the mangroves have been severely impacted, and coastal villages have also been severely impacted. There's also, of course, as I mentioned earlier on, loss of livelihoods to people. Schools have had to be closed because there's the stench of petroleum in the air. We, for example, have had to reduce the hours of work of our staff for health and safety reasons. The laborers who we employed are now not working because from a health and safety point of view. And ecotourism, which is a very important income for the organization, has ground to a halt. And ecotourism was already badly affected by COVID, and now it's a double whammy to have the Wakasho, which is also affecting tourism in that area very, very badly.
I understand that the grounding originally happened on July 25th, and that the oil began to leak around August 6th.
Right.
What do we know? I know it's been something of a mystery or a controversy, but what do we know about why there was apparently a lack of urgency or a lack of ability to prevent this disaster between the 25th and the 6th?
Okay, of course, this is a major debate, a major controversy. Just to put something else in perspective, so the 25th of July was on a Saturday, and I personally, the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, got involved as from 4 days later, which is the Wednesday 29th, if I get it correct. And this is where we started getting involved with the Ministry of Environment invited us to a committee to start discussing what actions to take. Although I presume there were actions being taken, there were meetings before then, which we were not party to. You must bear in mind that at the very first meeting and all the meetings, I was practically in meetings and site visits daily from then on, up to the oil wreck, up to the oil spill, up to the ship breaking in two, and up to today. Basically, I'm practically in meetings every single day, and sometimes several meetings. Now, you're asking me about the 12 days from the wreck to the oil spill. You must realize that every time that we went to a meeting, every time the question was raised or was asked, the answer was the risk of an oil spill is low. And I remember at one point I even questioned, what does that mean? Does that mean there's a low risk of oil spill, or is the risk of oil spill is low? There's a nuance there. There's a slight nuance, and I asked about that. And I was told almost it won't happen. I was told there will be no oil spill.
And who was doing the telling here?
The telling was done, first of all, by an organization which was hired by the owner of the company to set up the booms and to try to mop up any oil that may come out.
This is the Nagashiki company?
No, it was the local representative of the Nagashiki company. It's called Polyeco. But also remember that there were 3 salvage masters who were hired and who came out. They were from, I think, Smith something, salvage. And they came here. And basically, the handful of people who were advising at that time, and that was before the UN started coming in, that was before ITOF started coming in, that was before Japanese experts started arriving, that was before France came in. So up to that point, we were still being told that. I remember on the 5th of August. On the 5th of August, there were maneuvers being done by the salvage masters, and it was only around. I get my information from 2 sources, from the government source, but there's a WhatsApp group of a civil society WhatsApp group, and people comment on it and send photos and send drone pictures when they managed to get drone pictures. So there were 2 sources of information coming, and there were also people who live on the mainland of Mauritius in front of the ship who were sending pictures. And at around 10, 11, there were those pictures coming saying there's something happening about the ship. It's starting to tilt towards the bow, the back of the ship. So it was starting to tip towards the back of the ship. And then at around midday, we were told, don't worry, this is part of a maneuver to stabilize the ship. And I remember being in a meeting that very afternoon, and I asked the question, because I kept seeing the pictures showing the ship going tilting as the day was going by. And I asked the question whether, is this ship going to break in two? Is there going to be an oil spill? And I was reassured at 1400 hours, 1500 hours on Mauritian time, that don't worry, everything is under control, there will be no oil spill. And 16 hours later, the oil spill will have started, 16, 17 hours later. So it went from being a low risk of oil spill, almost saying, God, it's negligible, forget about it, don't even think about it, to being a tier 3 response. We're not even talking of a tier 1 or tier 2 or response. We're talking of a tier 3 oil spill within 14 hours. So something really went wrong from that point. So you must realize the message that was being sent all along from the time the ship wrecked to the actual oil spill was the risk of an oil spill is low. And I make this analogy. If somebody goes to his doctor and the doctor says, there's no risk of you getting diabetes. You're in good health and you've done your blood test and there's absolutely no risk of you getting diabetes. What do? Every time you have a cup of tea, you put three teaspoons of sugar in it. You don't take any precaution. But if the doctor says to you, I think you're really prone to diabetes, you start thinking, well, I think I'm going to have no sugar in my tea. And I make this analogy from a country which has got a high risk of diabetes so that people can understand the slowness of the response of the government of Mauritius and the authorities was, I will explain it, is because we were given the wrong reassurance. First thing. The second thing, there were periods within that time frame, that day frame, where the sea was rough. Now, we are in our winter, and our winter is known to have periods of very rough seas where you get waves of 5-6 meters at times. And during in that 12 days, there was heavy swells, and the sea was really rough for parts of that period of time. And when the tugs arrived, the tugs also couldn't come close to the ship to be able to pump the oil out. So I think I'm not trying to. I just said what I feel were the things, and of course, when you do a post-mortem of things, and Mauritius has got a national oil spill contingency plan going back to 1990, which was updated in 2003. I understand there was a report in 2012 or a draft of some sort. We have had training in Mauritius for almost every year in terms of national oil spill contingency, but there's nothing like actually facing an actual oil spill. And so I think Mauritius as a whole, including us in the civil society, this has been a very sharp learning curve for us. And experience comes with a very high price, and it's coming with a very, very high price here. And I'm sure that the next time we get an oil spill, because I know there'll be a next time, when you look at, for example, last month we had 2,000 ships that passed by Mauritius, and almost queuing on this sea route onto the east of Mauritius. Something is bound to go wrong sometime. And over the past 10 years or less, I've done the count, it's probably 5 or 6 shipwrecks. And there was one commonality in all these shipwrecks. None of these ships were meant to have come to Mauritius. There were the ships that were meant to go elsewhere, and for some reason are coming too close to our shores and are getting wrecked. So I don't know if that explains a little bit it's yes, criticism is easy, but I've said it, I think we were, it's like you go to your doctor and you're told you won't get, there's no way you're going to get diabetes, and in fact you're highly prone to diabetes. So you're misled by your doctor, is almost what I would say. I think, and I've said it publicly, I think we, Mauritius, and when I say we, I say to myself, first of all, we have been misled by the experts. Because I was on this committee, I was asking the question, and I said to myself, probably I should have been more forceful when I was asking these questions. And I think me to start with, we have been misled.
Okay. Well, then let's move forward a bit. And on August 6th, the oil spill begins to happen, and it becomes global news, and the world is shocked. It becomes headline news just about everywhere. Since that has happened, how would you evaluate the quality of the domestic and international response to deal with this disaster?
Well, the first thing was, I remember being in that emergency meeting on the 6th of August, called in urgently, and we just rushed down to Blue Bay, which is in the southeast of the island. And already the first thing we did was to ask the French government to send their equipment and their technical people from Réunion. Réunion is an island which is 150 kilometers from southwest of Mauritius, where so it's part of France, and they have logistics there, which is almost as France. Military base, and all of this, and they had capabilities to contain an oil spill there, equipment and people and so on. So I must say the first nation to have come to the rescue has been France, and in a major way. So I think we need to actually make known that as for the various countries that have assisted, the French help has been tremendous.
I should add that the president himself has commented on it, which I don't think any other world leader has.
Well, not only has he commented on it, but he's also sent his minister of outer islands, so overseas territories. So he's actually sent his minister to Mauritius, to Réunion, to Mauritius, to actually discuss with the authorities here. And there were 2 planes that came down with equipment. There was also a ship that came with equipment, military personnel, and depollution experts from France. But followed suit have also been the UN. So the government, first of all, declared a state of environmental emergency. The first time that has been applied ever since the law was there in the early 90s. So it's never had to be applied before. They've asked international assistance. And so far we have, as I mentioned, the French. We've had the British, who have recently sent some experts from the CFAS, which is an organization that looks at the monitoring of often oil spill. So that's the expertise which has been sent to Mauritius. Japan has sent a team, I think, of 6 or 7, probably more people to come and help in the strategy. I think those are the only nationalities that have come to the rescue, but we also have a promise of help from South Africa as well.
India did something, didn't they?
Oh yes, absolutely. India has also sent some equipment, quite a lot of equipment, to help mop up the oil from the lagoon. So there has been some assistance, but I think, unless I'm wrong, but there's been 5 nations who have actually come on the ground. That's not to say the Australians or Americans do not want to come to help and assist. It's just that we have to realize that international flights to Mauritius are held up. So getting to Mauritius for anybody coming from abroad is difficult. And Mauritius has had to actually relax COVID restrictions. Right now, if somebody from abroad comes, this person has to be 14 days in quarantine. But the experts who are coming, and there have been in excess of 70, I would say probably 80 experts or more that have come to Mauritius so far, they've come doing their tests, their COVID tests, but they haven't had to go into the 14-day quarantine. But Mauritius has to be a bit careful as well, and you can understand why. We do not want one problem to lead to a bigger problem, to another problem, which is a coronavirus outbreak again. So these are some of the, but of course there's been funding that's come. There have been many people from around the world contributing, including Japan. Ourselves, we have been receiving funds to try to cope with the Wakasho disaster. And interestingly enough, a high proportion of those people are contributing. I'm not saying necessarily large amounts, but any contribution we value. And a lot of these have come from Japanese citizens, ordinary Japanese citizens, and often with a short note say, we are really sorry for what happened, taking it quite personally. I mean, this is not the fault of the Japanese people. This is the fault of a captain and crew on board of a ship who we understand were having a party. So it's not the fault of the Japanese nation as such, but people from Japan have felt aggrieved by it and are contributing. And that I think is quite interesting, I think, and quite generous.
Well, I've been a little bit more critical of the Japanese government response than maybe you have been, but let me throw this by you. I mean,
Please.
Shouldn't there have been a statement by the Japanese government, by the Prime Minister, to say, hey, look, we're sorry about this. We're going to we understand our responsibility. We want to help. I mean, they did send a couple of teams from the foreign ministry, but it was quite low profile. and while the Japanese people have, I mean, I've seen on social media, there has been interest in this. There has not been a very big official response to this, even though the main companies involved in operating the Wakashio were Japanese companies. So I guess I don't know how forthright you want to be in criticism or how much you feel criticism, but do you believe that the response from Japan has been a little bit less than it should be? And what would you like to see going forward from today?
Okay. First of all, I saw that the owners of the ship, the Nagasaki lines, I think, they apologized publicly.
They
So
did.
I don't know whether you picked that, but I saw something where they apologized that this has happened, etc., which I think is a good sign. Is at least we haven't had an apology from the company. And I know that internationally, whenever there are mess-ups like this, rarely do others come forward and apologize. I've seen it in the car industry when something goes wrong with the cars. There's the big boss of Mitsubishi or Toyota or whichever company is involved that comes forward and says, we apologize. This does not necessarily happen in Western culture. In fact, they try to hold on to their jobs, and in fact, if they do leave, they leave with a very, very good golden handshake. Now, the fact that there's been this apology from the owners of the Japanese lines is, I think, a good step in the right direction to start with. Now, whether there should be an apology from the government of Japan, I'm not sure that should be. Of course, it's good if it comes, but I wouldn't insist on it because, as I said before, it's not the fault of the Japanese people. This is the fault of a captain and his crew that messed up. And remember, the captain and his crew are Indians and internationals, and I think, I stand corrected on this, I think there are no Japanese amongst the crew of the Wakashio. So I think it is, I wouldn't insist on an apology from Japan. However, what is interesting, Japan has sent the JICA. So we have experts from JICA. Japan is an international cooperation agency that are here. We have an expert on pollution that has arrived. We have 3 or 4 experts that arrived last week who are on toxicology and coral reef monitoring. So I think what Japan can do, what we need right now, are the experts in the fields that we really need to have to make correct, or as correct as can be, this problem, to right the problem. I wouldn't insist on a Japanese prime minister or minister apologizing to the country. But if there's help that a friendly country can extend to a friendly country, that would be most welcome. I'll put it this way. And the Japanese people, when I read the comments of Japanese people who are contributing a few yen or a few hundred yens or a few thousand yens, and I see the little messages that they send across, that's coming from the heart. That's more than an apology. It's not an official apology. It's an apology that comes from the people of Japan. And Japan is a friendly country to Mauritius. I mean, we are not at war with Japan. We don't have any contention with Japan. And we shouldn't build a contention around the Wakashio with Japan. However, there is one thing which I think is important. And I think this is a message to the PNI Club Japan. The Mauritius needs to get the insurance that it deserves. Unfortunately, too often in past wrecks, Mauritius has got near zero, or as I've often said so far, peanuts for the damage. So I think Mauritius needs to get the reparations. And the one thing that can happen is if the people of Japan or the authorities of Japan impress upon the PNI Club Japan to settle the claims and to not try to undercut what they pay out. That is something important. I refer to a shipwreck, the Benita, which I referred to earlier on. I understand Mauritius got around 1,000 euros of, about 1 million euros of compensation. So 42 million rupees, which roughly equates to 1 million euros of compensation, which is peanuts. There was another one where I'm not sure whether it was from PNI Club Japan, but there was another one where Mauritius government got 340 million rupees. It was the Angel One disaster. Again, not a lot of money. If I do the quick sums, it's about 8 million euros or 9 million euros only. And that includes the cost of recovery, the cost of cleanup, that includes the cost of getting the stuff out of there. And I understand that environmental costs were not even covered, were not even evaluated and not even covered. Here we're talking of the Wakashu, which has affected a quarter of the island of Mauritius, where you have two Ramsar sites. We have several nature reserves in the area. You have one fishing reserve, which is important for the livelihoods of thousands of people, if not tens of thousands of people. People are going to be out of job for a few months, at least. The sea will be polluted for, I suspect, a few years. And I think the compensation that Mauritius gets from the PNI Club Japan, because I understand it's PNI Club Japan that is going to do the payout, there should be no attempt to try to slash what Mauritius should receive from this wreck and this oil spill.
Okay. Second to last question from me is, the agenda going forward. Let's say, for example, this YouTube video happens to be seen by government officials around the world or by ordinary people. What is the agenda going forward? What does Mauritius need right now to recover from this disaster?
Well, right now there's a plan which has been discussed, which is the cleanup. So the insurers have hired a company called Le Floc, which is a French company, to come and do the depollution. They're called Le Floc depollution. So the cleanup. What worries me is that just before talking to you, Michael, I was reading this plan because I had to comment on it. What worries me is that we're looking at the short-term cleanup. So we'll clean up over the next few weeks, few months, 2-3 months, and then the floc depolluters will be out of the scene. What worries me is the long-term impacts. I've been reading of the effects of the deep water horizon, of there was another shipwreck of Spain, the Prestige, and I've been reading of a few of these, and you start picking up the effects of the oil spill 2, 4, 10, 15 years after the shipwreck. We will not necessarily be picking up anything short term. We'll be picking up long term, and by that time, the insurers would have done their payout. The wreck would have been dealt with. Half of it, as you know, has already been sunk. There's a discussion about scuttling the rest of the ship, and there might be prosecution or no prosecution. And what I'm worried about is we have marine life and we have terrestrial biodiversity, which is going to be affected in the medium and the long term. Who is going to be dealing with that? Is it going to be left for the government of Mauritius to deal with on its own? Is it going to be left for an organization such as the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation ourselves to deal with? And we have had to rescue reptiles from these islands. If these islands are polluted long term, the return of these reptiles will be difficult. We may face extinction of these reptiles on these small islands. Will the insurers and the owners of the ship be even concerned 5 years or 10 years down the line? And I'm trying to get some guarantees that they will assist us long term, and that their assistance is not just for a few months and then let's get out of here as quick as we can. And that is what I'm worried about, and this is something which I would ask the insurers, because one of the things to understand, insurers will not get involved with forecasted impacts and costs, and that is the problem, because the costs are going to be long term. and also effect on invertebrates. I mean, what I've been reading about so far is that the effect is on insects, and insects are at the base of the food chain for insectivorous birds and for reptiles. So we may not immediately find a collapse of our terrestrial birds and reptiles, but it may come down the line in a few years. So these are some of the things, and one thing which worries me, I think, I don't know if you, the listeners out there have picked up, last month there was 2,000 ships that came close to the east of Mauritius. If you look at Maritime IAS, you look at this and you see bunkers and container ships and fishing vessels almost queuing up one behind the other. There is bound to something will go wrong when you have such a high density of ships, and especially passing so close to Mauritius. Now, I think Mauritius must immediately go to the International Maritime Organization and say, look, because on the back of all these shipwrecks that we've been having, we must ask for particularly sensitive sea areas to be designated for Mauritius. So these are areas of sea that is very, very important biologically, and from which you can restrict or you can kick out any ship transport. So you can actually say, you're allowed to do innocent passage in our waters, but mate, you have to be 12 nautical miles outside our territory, or 24 nautical miles outside our territory, because we are showing how at risk we are. And the other thing is, we are picking up that there's been some, how can I say this, some shortcomings in terms of our naval monitoring systems. This is somewhere that Japan could help us out. You know, for example, Simbrandon doesn't have a lighthouse. You know, just putting a lighthouse on Simbrandon could be a small but efficient way of keeping ships off Simbrandon, and also our various radar systems, which we've heard from in Parliament that some of these were not functioning at the time of the shipwreck. You know, get those working 24 hours a day, 365 days, and also our response to oil spills. What I've commented this morning on some of the comments which I've sent to our government was the polluter, le flot depollution are here. I think there needs to be a legacy where we have lots of people from the civil society that are trained and can respond to these shipwrecks. Because if you recall, when there's an oil spill, whether there's shipwreck or an oil spill, before you get international people in, which may be 4, 5, 6 days, 7 days later, the first people to react are actually people who are here on Mauritius, who have got their small boats, their small outboard engines, are going to be able to take buckets. And I don't know if you've seen the thousands of ordinary Mauritians who have just come out from nowhere, from everywhere, nowhere on the island, and have come with their little meager means, that have put kilometers of booms and have been mopping up so many tons of this oil before the international experts arrived and this international assistance arrived. So I think we have to think of those. These will be the first people on the front lines whenever there's going a problem, and we have to empower the people to respond the next time, because there will be a next time. I'm sure there'll be a next time.
Okay, and finally, is there something that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you that you'd like to comment and put on the record for those who view this program?
Well, first of all, I like there has been a lot of ordinary people around the world who have sent messages, who have supported our fundraising initiatives. So please continue to do that, because that is a great way for us. I'm not saying this just to be able to make money out of a disaster. It's because with our ecotourism being so badly affected after COVID, after Wakasho, we are quite short of funds, let's put it this way. And we will have to restore the islands, and we'll have to depollute the islands long term. So we need money to be able to do that. We also, one other thing is the Mauritian diaspora out there, and I'm sure there might be diaspora out there in Japan and elsewhere, have been fantastic. I mean, they've come up from as anonymous people saying, can we help you in terms of materials? Can we help you in terms of doing webinars, passing the message? Or did you know that amongst the Mauritian diaspora, there's somebody who's an expert in oil pollution? No, we didn't know. And this person from New York, from the States, is advising us on a monitoring system. You know, we've had a lot of help like that, and there's Mauritian experts in communication who are helping us. So the Mauritian diaspora worldwide has been really fantastic. And I'll just say, keep going, and let's just all work together to make sure that there are less oil spills around the world. There is one thing that came home to me was, I've been, as I said to you earlier on, 25 years in this business, a quarter of a century. And if you'd asked me at any point in these 25 years whether I would ever have thought there would have been a shipwreck, a major shipwreck, and the Wakasho is not a small ship, having a shipwreck close to Île aux Aigrettes, or an oil spill of that order at our doorsteps, I would have said, never. Never, not in the wildest of dreams I would have even thought about that. And yet it's happened. So the message is that there is nowhere on earth which is actually safe from a shipwreck, from an invasive alien species introduction, or from an oil spill. Think about it. There's nowhere in the world. And we need to protect our special natural areas. We need to protect our reserves, our islands, those bits of places on Earth which we think will never get a shipwreck or an oil spill, but they do get these shipwrecks. I mean, we've had them in Alaska, where nobody would have thought there would be a major shipwreck and an oil spill in Alaska. We've had them in Mauritius. We have them off the coast of South Africa, and I'm sure we have them in other places, which are the very important areas that we've got left on the Earth and which we need to protect, and they are all extremely fragile.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today, and you've given us lots to think about. And at this point,